Doing good. Yeah.
Good, good. I'm keeping track of you via our mutual friend.
Yeah.
And I see Mitch here. I know him. And I think I see Tracy. I think I see you in there. So I think we know everybody here. So I'll give it till 9:05 here and we'll start. So I'm not wasting y'all's time. It's Friday, so I know everybody probably has something to do. And certainly more than listen to me yammer on about things, that's for sure. Okay, so it's 9:05. Well, thanks a lot, everyone, for coming again. I guess our first one went off pretty well, and I thank Jill for everything she did to put this one together and that one as well. And that was a good conversation. I think we had about 25 to 30 people in that, and we had some good conversations come out of that. Does everybody have a coffee this morning? Cheers to you if you do. I just wanted to talk for just a second about some things the police department is doing going on here. So one of the biggest things that we're doing right now is we're changing over records management systems. So traditionally in the, oh, sure, Tracy, we'll get you out. So traditionally here in Vermont, there have been two records management systems. There's been one called Spillman and one called Valcor. And over the years, Essex PD has been part of Spillman since like 1995. Valcor came around, I think, in around 2006, 2007. I think it was an initiative by Burlington Police Department. And since then, many other departments have joined that. Well, having two different records management systems in Vermont it's been challenging because while there was a way for each agency to see others' data and that type of thing and see each other's records, it was always kind of clunky in being able to go back and forth with those. So this past year, when Commissioner Mike Sherling was brought in, he issued a RFP to decide which one of those basically was going to go throughout the state. So they ended up choosing Valcor. So all the state agencies, state police have been on Spillman for all this time. So they're all going to be switching over in July. We were fortunate enough to switch over. It was one of the things I wanted to do anyway when I got sworn in as chief, was switch us over to Valcor so that we would be more common with many of the agencies here in Chittenden County who are already on Valcor for many years. So we're going to be switching over to that April 15th. And there's been a lot of work in the background getting prepared for that. We've had to train all of our employees. Every single employee has had to be trained in the new system. And we've had to do a bunch of IT things on the backside to make sure that everything was going to work properly and everything. But I'm not sure if everybody remembers, but Rick Gary, who was the chief here prior to me, he is still here. He's here working part-time as our IT/special projects person, and he's been handling that for us and doing a good job with it. So that's one of the things. And then the other project that we have going on in April is we will be going to body cams. We'll be getting those up and running middle of April. We've had the equipment now since December, but because of how many of these body cameras are being sold, we've had to wait on a waiting list in order to get the vendor here to actually do the programming and get it up and running. So every one of the officers will have a body cam available to them, and they'll be wearing those. It'll be mandatory for the officers to wear those. So we're finishing up our policy on that. It's going to reflect very much the one that is being modeled for the state that's being worked on right now down at the legislature. So we're trying to monitor that and make sure what we think is going to be in that is going to be also in the one that we have now. So we won't have to change too much. But once they do enact that, once they finally finalize that, we'll be mandated to adopt that policy anyway. So we're really hoping that ours is going to be very, very close to what that is anyway. And then if there's any small changes that have to be made, we'll go ahead and do that. But I'm really excited about that. Where I came from at St. Albans PD, we had body cams there since 2011, I believe it was. And they were very, very valuable for us for evidence, for accountability. They worked out very well for us. So they're a pretty good investment, I think. I mean, it's in monetary wise and as an insurance policy for the town and for the citizens. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then finally, we ordered our allotment of cruisers for the year, which was 2 approved in the budget. And those are both hybrid vehicles. And we decided to go with those. This was the first year that Ford has offered a hybrid cruiser. So we decided to go with those. We've heard really good things about them. They're very, very reliable. They've been proven very well during the testing that other larger agencies have done. So we decided to go with those. So we'll see how those work out for us and see what kind of a difference that they make with our gas usage and that type of thing. But they're a hybrid and not a true electric, so they're not going to have to be plugged in or anything like that. So yeah, so those are some of the things that we've got going on, and I'll stop talking and let someone else do some talking here. So. I'll ask you this, has anyone been following the story with the ship in the Suez Canal?
Yes.
It's crazy.
Did you see the bulldozer?
I did. It makes it look like a little small Matchbox toy. That's amazing.
It's pretty funny.
It is. Somebody said that wind blew it like across there like that. But I can't imagine how a large ship like that could get moved around so easily. But I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I have some experience with that sort of thing, and it's amazing what the wind will do, and it always comes along when you can't get any kind of headway.
Oh,
In
yeah.
a canal like that, you can't move very fast. That's the only thing that can keep you in line.
So is that also because how tall the containers are
Yeah.
as well?
It's
That's
like
what I was wondering.
it's like trying to drive a billboard in a high wind,
Oh, kidding.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that they must have what is it, a pilot or whatever that takes people through there? Do they have to hire a pilot or something like that to take them through?
Yeah, they have canal pilots. And it on top of everything else, I guess it was a sandstorm, and of course radar doesn't work too well in a sandstorm, so it just complicates things. You can't see anything, and the radar can't either.
Crazy.
When I first saw that, I thought, oh God,
that's crazy.
That poor guy.
Yeah, I'm sure he's feeling pretty bad about himself right now, but
yeah,
I guess there's things that
can't be done. The whole world is watching, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Ron, I was wondering also about the cameras. I know my brother works in the news, and he said one of the issues when they were doing stories on it was the data crunching, that it took a lot of extra staff to do that. Can you just elaborate or kind of review that with us?
Well, the records requests that come from it are what the really labor intensive part is, because in our experience in St. Albans was that once we went to body cameras, there's video on virtually every call that we go to. So any kind of criminal case that we make is going to have video with it. So it takes a records person, and unfortunately up there they didn't have a records person to do it that was skilled in doing it. So it fell on me. And I was doing all of the records requests for body cameras, and it took a lot of time to do that. That's the biggest part. And then if there's something that has to be redacted, that's also a pretty big lift. Now, we won't have the redaction software. We haven't gone with that yet because it was a significant expense on top of what we were doing. But what we were going to do is that if we did have something that needed to be redacted, we could send the video to one of the other agencies that does have it, and they would hopefully do it for us at least a few times a year if we did need it. But honestly, that doesn't come up that much where things have to be redacted, where a person has to be redacted out of it. So that's the largest part, is the storage of the video, because you make so much video that it becomes a problem trying to store all that. So one of the decisions that we made was to go ahead and store it with the company up in the cloud. And
I was going to ask that. So it's a monthly
yeah.
subscription for the storage, or?
Yeah, so it's a subscription model, of course. That's where everything goes to these days. And the video will actually go temporarily onto a hard drive here, and then it gets uploaded into the cloud. And then if we need to share it with somebody, it actually, a link gets sent to, you know, that person or the state's attorney, and then they can download it directly from their servers in the cloud. So yeah.
So if they need it then like that, and when you're sending a link, does that help reduce some of the labor because they are the ones that have to go through it, or how does that work?
It actually does. It saves some of the labor, and it saves some of the having to burn CDs and DVDs. I mean, believe it or not, up until about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, we were still burning DVDs. So when we went right, and of course with the court, you have to burn at least 2 copies of everything. So that was one of the things we did when we went to the system that we have in the cars right now in our in-car cameras. That is the same company that we're using for body cameras, and they actually do the same thing for in-car cameras with a cloud version. So we went to that, and that was so much easier for our records person to just be able to send a link instead of having to burn all that. So yeah, that saved us a bit of work there. Yeah.
So then you don't, it essentially eliminates the hard copy, because really even for the court system, you can send the link.
Correct.
And
yes.
And then,
yes.
So our court systems now in Vermont have hopefully all court systems are moving to that model to save and create efficiencies and reduce costs.
Yeah, they're trying to. Most everything is done digitally now. They have the ability to be able to pull up video in the courtrooms, and I think via Zoom now and everything. So yeah, they're doing everything like that. They're not burning anything or have to worry about pulling discs or anything. So yeah, they're
and so shared software as well too. Are we all on statewide on the same software systems, or?
No, unfortunately, we're not. We and the state police are the largest ones, and then probably I would say half of the state have gone to a company called WatchGuard, and they're probably one of the larger companies. And then the other half of the state is probably with a company, the same company that makes tasers, which is Axon. So they're common sort of, but not really. So we can't like access video from state police, even though we're on the same system, because of the evidentiary value of things. We can't have, outside agencies looking at our video and that type of thing, or having access to them. We don't want to have those questions. So that's not as big a deal as what our records management system is, to have commonality. It's good because we can tack on to the same contract that the state police got. So because they're buying 700 cameras or whatever it was that they bought, and I don't think it was that many, but it was a lot. So we get to tack onto that contract, so we get a little bit better price out of it. So that was a good
a quantity buy then in terms.
Yeah.
And did you guys, as kind of, I guess you'd end up with a kind of a consortium of the municipalities? Do you all talk to each other so when you're quantity buying things, or?
We do, but not as much as we should. You're right in that respect. We do, but not as much as we should. So usually what we will do is we'll ask a vendor if there's a state contract, if they've issued a state contract through state, I forget what organization it is, but there's an organization within the state, BGS, that does contracts. So we will ask for those contracts before we buy anything and see if there's one out there. And many times, even if the state of Vermont hasn't done one, sometimes we're able to tack on to like Massachusetts or New Hampshire or something like that if we're asking the right people. So which we always try to do. So yeah.
Cool. And then the other part about the because I know nothing of it. I'm sure my brother could probably tell me, but
Sure.
When you guys take video, obviously, and there's hours and hours and days of it, I'm sure. How is it marked? Like is it the system that does that? Is it by date? Do you add a name to it? Because how do you search something that you want?
So the officers actually have the ability, they can connect to their camera with their phone, or they can wait until they come into the office and do it via the program, the management program. So they can put a tag in there, which is the case number. So it always goes back to that case, and they can also put a tag in there that says how long the video should be held for. So storage and retention, like you said, is one of the biggest things. So how long do we hold things for. So by state law, anything criminal or anything like that has to be held for 7 years. So if they tag the video as a criminal case, it automatically tells the system that video can't be released for 7 years. It can't be disposed of. So, so we do it like that. But yeah, it will have a tag for the, and it's, of course, it has a date and time and all of that. It has the officer's name attached to it, and it has the case number, so we can quickly find those cases and get those sent out. Yeah.
So I assume the marker would start when, let's say there's an incident that they're responding to, that's when they would turn the camera on, I assume, and then
Correct.
Whenever they're done interacting, that's when it turns off, or when do they turn it off?
They turn it off when the case is over with, when they're done dealing with that incident, whether it's, roadside, they get back in their car and they're done, or if they were to make an arrest, they might want to turn that back on. They may turn it off while they're in the car driving here, because they've got an in-car camera that records that. And then once they get here to the office, they might want to turn it back on. And then once they're completely done with the case, they would turn off the body camera, and then it would end from there. So they have the ability to turn it on and off themselves, but via policy, we will have, when it has to be turned on and when it can't be turned off. So.
And is that problematic for them to remember to turn it on?
You know what? I think getting used to it and seeing the experience that we had in St. Albans, after the officers have had them for a week or two, it's like second nature. It's like and we have a lot of officers here that keep asking, when are we getting these? When are we getting these? When are they going to be here? They're excited about getting these. So I think it gets to be second nature as to whether, I got to turn it on now, now I can turn it off, that type of thing. So it does. And sometimes people, we've seen they've turned it on when they probably shouldn't have, or forgot that it was on, and that kind of thing. But
right.
So
embarrassing.
Yeah, they do. They get used to it, and they become second nature for them. Yeah.
And are they also utilized in a way for I played sports, and we had games that were taped always, and we certainly used them as training for us. The coach would review, and if there was something they saw that we could improve, then we would all sit together and talk about that. Do you guys utilize them in that way as well?
Yes. Yeah. Once we get them here, we will definitely do that. We did it in St. Albans, where we would tag something as a training video, something like that, so we could hold on to it. We've already made a tag for training, so that way, if it is something that's interesting or something that we think we can get some training value out of, we'll definitely hold on to that, so we can use it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Sorry for hogging so much time, you guys. Just I'm really fascinated. So.
Yeah. Well, hit me up on email or whatever. And we can get some more, or give me a call. We'll figure out if you got anything else, Lorraine.
Thanks so much.
So Evan had asked earlier thoughts on what you believe are your major challenges, and then Roseanne just entered a question: is there oversight to make sure cameras are being used and video isn't being deleted prematurely?
Sure. Let's see. So the first question was, what do we think what are major challenges with cameras, or with everything?
I think Evan's question was broader, so maybe addressing Roseanne's first.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Pretty much what you think the police department challenges are, Ron.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So let me get Roseanne first, because we're talking body cameras. So is there oversight to make sure cameras are being used and video isn't being deleted? Yeah, so there actually is. So part of our policy will be that our supervisors have to review a certain amount of videos, and they will constantly be reviewing video, especially if it's a use of force case or something like that, then video automatically gets reviewed. But there's parts in the policy that says that video has to be reviewed, and let's see, video isn't being deleted. So the system won't allow someone, just a normal officer, to delete anything. It has to be a program supervisor that does it. And the only people who will be able to do that are like myself and probably Rick Gary, who's going to be the program manager. And there'll have to be a record of that made as to why it was deleted. Generally, we don't delete any video. It just doesn't make sense, especially if it's something that's, needs to be like a criminal case or something like that. But obviously, if it's we can't hold every video forever, because it'll be just too much storage. So one of the parameters that we will have to set is, how long do we hold, a video of somebody just having a conversation that was just innocuous or something like that, or it was a minor call, you know, where something, you know, no action was taken or anything like that. And we think that's probably going to be 4 months. And I believe that goes along with what the policy, the model policy is going to be in that they're coming up with in the state. So, yeah. So, yeah, so it won't be, the system will automatically delete some video after a while, but it won't be deleted by us without having some type of oversight on that. So.
And are you gonna, you also mentioned redaction earlier. When you redact something, will the original that still has that'll still exist as
Yes,
right?
yes. What the system, what it does is it copies the video, and then it simply, when I say redaction, in case people don't know what that means, it's putting like a blur over someone's face. So if there's like a juvenile or something like that in the video, we can redact that out so the person isn't identified. So yeah, the original gets saved, and then there's another copy that's a complete copy that's made with the actual redaction. Yeah, so it doesn't go away. I have to say, the folks that have developed these systems, they have thought about just about every case that there possibly could be, because there's been so many people that have used these. I mean, we're going on 10 years now that body cameras have been used by law enforcement. So there's a lot of different things that have happened, and all these experiences have come back to the developers, and they really take everything into account as to what can be asked for. So.
And my last question, Ron, is
Yeah.
do you have a tag that's going to be for any interactions with folks from the global majority, so that you have a record of all those interactions there might be data that you can glean from that kind of stuff, those kinds of videos. Have you guys given any thought to that kind of thing?
I guess I don't understand what you mean by global majority. I don't understand.
But the BIPOC community.
Oh, gotcha. No, we won't have anything like that, because I think what we would be doing is we would be relying on the officers. Well, we'd be relying on the officer's perception of what had happened, and I don't know if that would open us up. And I'm willing to hear arguments with that, but I think that would open us up to, like, well, are you tagging these videos because of a certain thing? Is it a bias that you're doing this because, that kind of thing? I don't know if that's something we would want to explore.
Unless you tagged them as training videos, right? To see, are your officers responding differently depending on what the person that they're interacting with looks
That's
like.
true. That's true too. I mean, we certainly could do that. We could pull those randomly. Certainly, if we know about something, we could just pull them randomly and take a look at those to make sure that those interactions are going the way that they should, right?
Right. I'm just thinking that, we're on the Racial Justice Task Force, right? So we're very focused on this, and we're very focused on having a welcoming, inclusive community for everybody. And, we're white, and we need to, train ourselves and catch when we're, doing things that are inappropriate, whether we realize that they are or not. And I think, there could be a lot of information to be gleaned from looking at that. The other thing is, I think this more recent spate of crime against folks of Asian descent in this country has really sent up flags, again, to say, look, any interaction with folks from the global majority needs to, not any interaction, but anything that happens, needs to be thought of as a hate crime first, and then back into, is it not really that? So again, whatever data we can have and collect, I think the more we can learn, both you all as the police, law enforcement, and all of us as the greater community, to how to do better.
That's a good thought. That's a good thought. Something we can certainly look at moving forward with those.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Brad has a question.
Yeah.
I want to get to that before getting to, we can save Evan's for when there's.
Yeah, I'd rather take Brad's.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
Okay, thanks.
Good to see you.
Morning, Chief. Do you handle digital forensics in-house, or do you contract that out with state police or one of the other agencies?
We have some ability in-house. We do have some equipment that can download, like phones and that type of thing. but most of the stuff that we're doing now is being sent to the crime lab to be done. If it's, especially if it's anything more involved with like tower computers or laptops, something like that, because they get a little bit more technical. So we're sending those to, there's an organization here in Vermont called ICAC, and don't ask me what that stands for. I can't remember. It's the Internet Crimes Against Children, right? Yeah, I got that right. So those folks are specially trained in downloading and obtaining digital evidence. So we do a lot with them. We send things to them, and then they take care of it for us. Yeah.
Have you done any work with Celebrite? I know that's, I believe the state police uses Celebrite.
Yeah, that's the equipment that we have here is a Cellbrite equipment, so that we can download phones and that type of thing. Yeah.
Second question, and this is a sensitive issue within the town. It has to do with the merger or separation. How do you perceive your role as a police agency in a merged town versus a separated village and town? Do you feel comfortable answering that?
Yeah, no, I certainly can answer. I've answered that question before.
Okay.
So I see our roles as more simplified in a merged town. That's what I will say to that. I don't see our relationship or how we enforce the law or anything like that, or how we work for the village versus the town changing no matter what happens, unless of course the village decides that they want to separate completely and not have us as their police department, which I really hope that wouldn't happen. But as a merged town, we would see things be simplified, because then we could have one set of ordinances for everybody, where, then an officer wouldn't have to go look in two separate books to look up this, what is it over here and what is it over here and that type of thing. So that would just simplify things for us, as well as having one set of, one town manager versus a town manager and a village manager, and, and having, two boards that we work for. So, and granted, we've been doing great with them. So like I said, things aren't going to change that much for us, we hope. But that would, just being merged would simplify things for us.
Thank you.
You bet.
Mitch had a question.
Yep. Hi, Mitch.
Yeah, how you doing, Ron? Has
Good.
there been any progress with what we spoke about the other day?
Yep, I do have some things to talk to you about, but I'm not quite finished with that. So I'll give you a call probably Monday on that, if that's all right.
Okay, that sounds good, because a couple of things I've been thinking about. I mean, I guess the overall discussion is, and what I brought up in our meeting, is how we can move forward to codify things so that things can be prosecuted when they need to be. And this comes out of the fact I was reading something about the shooting that took place in, was it Boulder or something like that, Colorado?
Yeah.
And they report the guy was a badass neighbor. I mean, noise all hours of the day and night, people coming and going, probably drug dealing, although they didn't say that specifically. But usually when we have people coming at 3 a.m, it's not for a coffee chat. And it's like, why? Does this sound familiar or what? So, I mean, I don't know if my particular situation will lead to something like that. But, when you have a scofflaw like that, usually there's something more than that. And, just for everyone's sake here, I was assaulted by someone associated with this neighbor. And so now I'm very concerned for the safety of myself and my family. And it doesn't appear to be anything that could be done. And that's not okay. You have you have something that happens, then you have to have witnesses, and you have an ordinance, and the ordinance is on your side, but then enforcing said ordinance or actually putting it through the courts is yet another matter. And that's where there's a giant disconnect. And when it's, if it's something that's a nuisance, that's one problem. But when it's something where someone's safety is affected, we really need to, as a community, rise to a higher level than that and not allow that to happen. And that's why, I want to pursue this, is that, it's really gotten too far.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I hear you there, Mitch. Like I said, I do have some information for you on that, but I'd rather not make it in this group, put it out there in this group. But I'll touch base with you Monday more on that. I have done some things in the background here in the last few days. So.
Okay, and yes, we have tried to restorative justice in it.
Yes.
It didn't restore anything yet. Hopefully that may work.
Yeah, Lorraine, this problem did go to the CJC, and they were working hard on it. All parties tried to work on it, and so far we haven't been completely successful. So.
And of course, Ron, I asked that because one of my family members is in the same boat for many, many years.
Yep.
And we're very, very frustrated. And we also believe that there's drug activity there as well. And also certainly firearm ordinance issues, because air guns don't cover it in the town. And they shot my sister's house.
Yep.
And that's very upsetting, and nothing was done. And I don't know, and I view the family as a family who is in need as well, the family that's creating the problems, that they have needs that aren't being met that create this problem. And I don't know how, as a town, we can better serve everyone's needs in those kind of cases.
Sure. And what you're talking about is very similar to what Mitch is talking about, which is basically, we know that there's a problem. However, the law won't allow us to be able to address that, by successfully prosecuting, because there has to be witnesses that will prove it. And it's not just convincing the police that there's an arrest that needs to be made, it's convincing a jury. But so it's very, very similar. And I know the situation that you're talking about. So, and I've been involved in that one as well. And we've done a lot of work there too, or tried to, but if you want to hit me up privately on that, I will definitely answer some more questions for you with that.
I might do that at some point when we get through the merger.
Absolutely.
The merger question.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that seems like it's taking everyone's time right now. So,
can I ask a question on the same topic? Has there been any, and I'm just trying to get up to speed, has there been any engagement from non-law enforcement community, like social services or mental health services, something in that sector with these various folks that Lorraine and Mitch are talking about?
Well, like we said, in Mitch's case, we did utilize the CJC to try to do some things, and honestly, I don't want to delve into that too much for their privacy and everything, but that was attempted there. On the other one that Lorraine is talking about, no, they weren't, because most of the stuff that we were dealing with there was either of an ordinance or a criminal nature, so there wasn't anything more that was done there. But certainly, if there was a component to it that we thought that would be addressed or could be addressed by social services or someone in the mental health field, we certainly would do that. But that also comes with voluntariness too, and the person has to be able to has to voluntarily want to go through that process. So we can't force someone to accept help that they won't take. So,
well, one of the frustrating aspects, Ron, was that one of the family members is not allowed to be around guns. And the way the family was sidestepping that was they were saying he wasn't living there when it was clear he was living there. He was staying there clearly more than 2 days, because his car was parked there every night. So we knew he was there. We had looked up his information. So are there ordinances that cover, because I know for like landlords, they're allowed to charge people who visit for more than a certain amount of days. Are there laws that can be applied like that as well in these kind of cases?
I don't think so. And in that case that you're talking about, I don't know if there were ever actually firearms that were involved in that. It was an air gun, like you were saying.
No. I'm saying the family owns a lot of guns. We know that they do. And the son came back home because, he struggles, and he's not allowed to be around guns. And he was in a home with a lot of guns. So how can that be tackled?
I would have to look to see where that condition comes from. If it comes from him being a convicted felon, that he can't be around, that he can't possess firearms. And here we go with terminology in the law, right? Possession is different than being around them. So you have to determine those types of things, whether he himself was possessing them or just somebody that he was staying with had them. And honestly, that doesn't fall to us. That usually falls to the ATF. We usually rely on them to make those types of determinations because that's federal law. So like I said, I understand what you're saying there. I think we'd have to do a little bit more looking into that to find out exactly what that meant.
Okay.
Brad had a question.
Yes, with regard to, this might apply to Mitch and Lorraine, I'm not sure, but in discussions with Rick when he was the chief, and I believe you were in on the conversation when I spoke with the two of you during the firearms ordinance, that one of the problems that you guys have is with the Chittenden County State's Attorney. They are not staffed to handle low-grade crimes. I guess the workload is too high, and so they're not willing to take on low-grade crimes, even though someone's breaking the law. You can't. I mean, you run up against a roadblock with the state's attorney, and you're not able to prosecute, or at least to bring it, to their attention and have them address it. So there's, that's an issue.
No, you're correct in that. I mean, the police can make a case and send it to the state's attorney, but the state's attorney is actually the one that does the charging document, and they get to choose what cases that they charge and they don't charge. So, our state's attorney here has set her policies as to what cases they're going to take and what they're not going to take. But then we have thrown in COVID on top of that. And you can ask Jill this, her cases have seen a significant increase because of the state's attorney not prosecuting cases due to limitations at the court, because the court is only allowing them to take a certain amount of cases every day, or file a certain amount of cases every day. So a lot of those cases are being sent to the CJC for those guys to work on. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it comes along with the limitations of the state's attorney and the state's and the court system. So you're right.
Yeah, it's. I mean, if it can be resolved locally versus in the court system or at a higher level, all the better. But it's just that your hands are tied in many cases.
Sometimes you're right in those cases. Sometimes.
Thanks.
Does anybody else out there have anything else?
Yeah, still on the same topic. Is there, and I'm just brainstorming now, so this could be really out to lunch. Okay, so we talked about these like bad neighbor kind of situations, but they're really worse than bad neighbors. It like you said, CJC isn't exactly working, law enforcement isn't exactly appropriate, social services, mental health isn't exactly appropriate. Is there something like from a neighborhood watch kind of, just like Brad says, I mean, the more local you can be with a solution, right, the better off. Is there like a neighborhood watch kind of thing where a group of neighbors could kind of, focus on the bad neighbor and try to get things straightened out, or just some people just too far, I don't want to say around the bend because, but just they're just out there too far to be able to rein back in.
Well, I think that would be great if we could do that and, have like an intervention on someone and tell them, hey, listen, you're really causing all these issues in the neighborhood and this is what we would like you to do. I think as some folks here will tell you, I think they would say that's kind of, I wouldn't say unrealistic, but there's many people that just don't want to hear it. They have their own thing, they have their own agenda, and they just don't want to hear what anyone else has to say. They're going to do what they want to do unless, they're charged with something. And honestly, sometimes, like we've been seeing over the last few months, the police aren't necessarily the right tool for the job. There's other things maybe that are more appropriate, but sometimes we find that the only thing that will make someone change their behavior is to issue them tickets or to arrest them or whatever. And is that the best outcome that we can hope for? I tend to think not. I think sometimes there's better things that we could try, but it's a really frustrating situation, not only for the people that live next door, like these folks are talking about, but for us as the police department. I mean, we don't want to have people calling us every day about, their neighbor because they just can't get any peace. We don't have to live there. They do. So we feel bad for them as well. We feel bad for the person that's causing the problem. We just want everybody to have peace in their neighborhood, but sometimes it's a very frustrating and long, drawn out process to try to get these situations taken care of. Sometimes there is no good outcome.
And Roseanne, to that point, and I don't know, Mitch, I've never met you, but I mean, this has been ongoing for over 10 years now. And so that was one of the things I was thinking in terms of for the police officers, because it really consumes their resources as well when they could be doing other things and are thinking about maybe having a social worker on staff as opposed to Howard Mental Health, because despite it being a 24/7 service, that doesn't really, in reality, it's not 24/7 because you can't always get them right away. So you can't have access to them. I know from my own family member, we just had this happen, and he had to wait for 2 hours to get help from Howard Mental, and he was in serious crisis. So that is, I don't know the solution for that, but other than hopefully when we see a series of calls from the same household, at least that starts a flagging system to create solutions, because it indicates what we're doing isn't working, right? When you have to keep going to the same house that many times over the years. And we worry, it's bad for my family member, but we also worry about the family themselves. One of the heads of the household is a vet. He served our country, so we feel for him. The son has struggled with drug addictions as well as being in and out of jail. So he's not really adding to society in ways that he could. So we feel, that there's got to be a better way for him. It can't be happy for him. We even called a welfare check from one night when it was below zero and he was out in his car in front of the house. Those things concern, he's a member of our community, so we are concerned about him. And so that's why, to me, as a community, I'm hoping that we're also looking nationally at other services that, like Cahoots that we talked about, that do have better outcomes. And are we starting to look to other successful models? I think I sent you something, Ron, from Denver. I think they were doing something very successfully. And it was the police chief himself who he ended up leaving, but he was the one that started the program. And apparently it was so successful that they added, I think, 5 more members to the team. And Roseanne, I think you watched that, the NYU, right? Didn't you join that? Yes, with us, where right. And she talked about female officers, because I see there's a push statewide for female officers, because statistically there are better outcomes just by having female officers. And her thinking and her wish, which I would hope, Ron, that you would access and talk to her about it, but her wish was to have a 4th department that was separate from the police, because I think that would help you guys, because I also worry about the officers who consistently have to deal with this and don't have good outcomes, because that can't be healthy for the officers either. So I worry about their mental health as well over time and burnout.
Yeah, and that's a good thought. I mean, like I said, no one's more frustrated when they can't solve a problem than a police officer, because that's what we do. We solve problems. That's what we're tasked to do with. And sometimes we just can't solve them. So I will say the programs that you're talking about are very, very similar to what we have here with community outreach. Although we do share the resources with other towns, lots of times we've called those folks in for these types of neighbor disputes and those types of things. They're not always successful. Like I said, a lot of that deals with and depends on the person being volunteering or being willing to try to do something with that and change what their behavior is. So, it can be successful, yes, but there's also a lot of obstacles to that, and it all depends on what that person wants to accept and what they don't want to accept. And we always have to act under the Constitution. We cannot do things that are unconstitutional. We can't do things that are against the law. So we always have those things bearing on us as well. So I like what you're talking about there, Lorraine. I think that having more resources to do those types of things is a good thing. And I guess moving forward, we'll see where that ends up.
Right. I know a good friend of mine is a psychiatrist out of Howard Mental Health Center. So she works a lot with the different municipalities and the police. One of her frustrations that she's shared, and she's been doing this for many, many years, is that a lot of times, because the officers are very frustrated, they don't want to tag along, and they kind of, this is your problem, because they've just kind of had it. And her hope was that when they are called and they go out to mitigate the situation, is that it's an opportunity for training for the officers as well, how to better approach the situation at hand, especially when it's a crisis situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good thought. I don't know if I'd ever heard that perspective before, but that's a good thought. I mean, yeah, the officers don't, I mean, like I said, the officers want to go and solve a problem, but we only have certain ways that we can solve it. And when we can't use those, sometimes you get frustrated, and you have to think outside the box. So that's one of the things that we've been concentrating on, is thinking outside the box. Think of different ways that you can solve a problem that are not just using a law or using an ordinance or something like that. Think of other ways that we can solve a problem. And yeah, going out there with a social worker it can be frustrating, because they work in different ways than what the police do. But I think over time that's gotten better. And I know our folks certainly here appreciate having community outreach go with them when it's something that they can be involved in, and take that person off their hands, and do their magic, and because they have skills that we don't. We really appreciate those things.
I would just want to jump in and say the Community Justice Center has worked successfully with a number of conflict situations in the community involving neighbors and other things. And Ron and I were part of a think tank with across the country law enforcement who use restorative justice. So that retired police chief from Colorado, their program is very similar to the Community Justice Center. It's a matter of resources for one, but I see Mitch is writing something about, social norms and social contracts. And that's ultimately at the key of what community justice centers are about, is trying to not overutilize the police and criminalize behavior that we don't like, and to try to focus more on what are these social norms, or what's the social contract that we want to hold each other to. And when there's harm in a relationship because of some kind of conflict, the CJC works to resolve that or make it as good as possible. But like Ron said, that it has to be a voluntary process, and all parties have to want to give it a shot. So sometimes it doesn't work.
Which is totally frustrating, because if somebody's being negatively impacted by somebody else, it shouldn't be voluntary for the other party, because clearly they've overstepped the line. Well, maybe not clearly, maybe
that's it. Yeah, I was just going to say that the word there is clearly, and that bears into interpretation as to whose definition are we going by, and
right.
We run into that constantly.
Right. But when you live in a neighborhood, but when you live in a neighborhood, you have to, you're not living way out there where you don't have neighbors and you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So, yep. Does anybody else have something different they want to talk about, or anything following on with that?
Evan's still got his question out there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the major challenges that we're facing, I would say some of the major things that we're facing specifically here with Essex is a changing and growing population. We're seeing a lot of building that's being done here for apartments and for senior housing, those types of things. Those things take on new responsibilities for all of us, because they bring a different population with them. So for the police department, like everyone I believe is aware that Champlain Housing has purchased the building over on at the old Baymont on Susie Wilson Road. So that's a lower income folks that are living there. Well, they sometimes bring their own issues with them. and law enforcement has to deal with those. So we see a changing population with people coming in like that. I would say another challenge that we see is a changing landscape in the legislature. I mean, we don't know what later this year is going to bring, or next year is going to bring, for new laws that will affect how we do our jobs as law enforcement. I mean, there's been numerous bills in the legislature in the last 6 months to a year on use of force and on qualified immunity now, and lots of different things that are going on down there that are going to affect how we do our jobs. Body cameras, or we talked about that. So those are some of the things that we have to adapt to and be ready to change our training. Number one, change how we operate. So those are, I would say, those are probably the greatest challenge that we have right now. So I talked to other chiefs, and some chiefs would tell you that their biggest issue, or one of their greatest challenges, is the relationship they have with their community. And I am here to tell you that I'm glad that we have the community that we do, and the relationship that we have with our community, where we don't have those same issues. I think we have a great community here, and I think the police department is an integral part of that, and just evidenced by having all of you folks show up here on a Friday morning to talk to me. I mean, in some communities that wouldn't happen, and it certainly wouldn't be as personable a conversation as what we've had. So I would say those are probably our greatest things. And then the question that came up earlier with merger, where's that going to lead us? So yeah,
I think talking about the social norms things gets right back into this. Is that there's, in our society, there's no norms. When a policeman stops you, people act really bad. And policeman stops you, answer their question. They're trying to investigate something, and instead people do the dumb thing where they thrust their hand in their pocket. Duh, and then it's always a bad thing. But getting back to this about how to be a good neighbor, and maybe I'll throw the challenge out because we talked about it, but who would do it? Do we have somebody here, or somebody who can be tasked to write up a social contract of what it means to be a good neighbor? Where you don't start banging things around at 10 o'clock, after 10 o'clock at night, and the dog things, and having visitors come out all out, where you say, no, don't do this. So it wouldn't be of law. It would be, this is what a good person would do. And then you'd have a part there about, when a policeman stops you, you're required to show this, that, and the other thing. Instead of, a friend of mine says, I don't have to tell you anything. You say if a policeman stops him, it's like, well, that's not right. And you make the whole thing just difficult for everybody. But I think if we actually codified that and put it in, the reporter, or put it online or whatever, so everyone sees, because, the first thing is bringing it to consciousness where everyone sees it, that, really ought to be doing that. And then people then will start to think, gee, maybe I ought to behave this way and not be the guy laying on the outside, doing it wrong. But who would do this? I guess that's the question.
I don't know. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I think it's kind of a slippery slope in some respects, where you start to head into some sort of Stepfordville. The other thing is, I think we need to think about our whiteness, and the folks who are saying, hey, I don't have to give you that information, when they're talked to the police, maybe folks that are being asked questions they wouldn't be asked if they looked different. For instance, if I'm Black, I may be asked more questions than I would if I'm white. And so I think we have to be careful telling everybody to say, oh, you just do whatever the cop wants, because I think that comes from a place of whiteness. I think we have to be careful of that kind of stuff.
And privilege.
And privilege. Now, the flip side of it is, I don't know if Mitch was headed there or not, but I also think that a lot of people have lost or were losing common sense and just some level of, knowing how to interact appropriately. So I think sometimes it is good to have guidelines for people. It says, you know what, think about your freaking neighbors and, don't do stuff that you wouldn't want, done to you. Like, but people may have legitimate reasons why they have to make loud noises at night, because maybe that's when they're coming home from work because they work third shift and are leaving for work. You got to really have to understand the whole thing and not come from this, upper middle class, white perspective, because a lot of the world, a lot of people are in a lot different situation and circumstances.
Can I respond to that? Roseanne, that sounds more like creating division and stereotyping people rather than creating unity. So I think that's really off color.
Yeah, I'll jump in and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave the call in a minute, but I agree with you, Bradley. I think it's not I think there's a lot of focus. Granted, there's a long history of separation and Roseanne, to your whiteness comment, but I think as a society, we have to start mending that. We have to stop pointing out divisions and working together. And Bradley, to Mitch and your point, I think a lot of it is within our society. It seems like there is a level of respect that's missing in our society, whether it's respect for our police officers, respect for each other, respect for your neighbors. And I don't know, I don't have an answer on how do you get that back? How do you get people to respect each other and the rules and regulations and laws and, social skills, whatever those are. That's a downward spiral I see in our society. And how do we pivot on that? How do we change that? And I don't have an answer, but I am a little frustrated as well with a lot of focus on division in our world versus coming together.
I think you start with writing it down, so that it's out there. It's on the billboard, and I don't have a problem. My neighbor goes to work at 3 a.m. I don't have a problem with that. I don't hear the car or whatever. I mean, it's everything else that goes on that's a problem. And so there is a line of reasonableness, but he thinks he's doing nothing wrong. That's the problem. He thinks it's okay to take the dogs out at 3 a.m. and have them bark or whatever. And someone needs to say, no, don't do that. I mean, we already have an ordinance that says don't do that, but we can't seem to enforce it. But, just kind of like a contract with people. This is what you do. And you know what? Yeah, it applies for all people. All people should do this. We should stop tagging people and you're this group or that group or whatever. It doesn't matter. If we start with Essex. If you live in Essex, this is what we would like you to do. And you know what? Some people will say, hey, I didn't know that. That's interesting. I mean, I think people would embrace it if it was actually written and it was something that we were all aspiring to do that, to be better people, to really make people want to be better neighbors. We don't do that in our society. I mean, you look what's on TV, it's horrible. I mean, people are just nasty and whatever else. It used to be the church used to do this, right? Because, that's not a big thing anymore. But maybe the community needs to take this up, and not just our community, but all communities need to take that up and say, gee, this is what we'd like you to do. It's not a law, but we just like you to do this. And, if we get some people to embrace it, maybe we can cut down the neighbor disputes by a third or something like that.
Mitch, with some of that, because it sounds like when you talk about walking dogs in 3 a.m, would even just a sound ordinance help? Because I don't think we have sound ordinances in certain areas out here.
No, we do have sound ordinances, and those are kind of the things that the state's attorney won't prosecute. It's not a problem with walking the dogs. If they walk the dogs, the dogs wouldn't bark. They do not.
No, I didn't mean that. I mean, I'm just pulling that out of what you said. I mean, if someone's partying till 3 a.m. and cars are coming and going at 3 a.m. and it's loud because there's music going on, things like that. we have a sound ordinance that covers that?
There's a state law and there's a town law, but good luck trying to get it enforced. That's what we've been up against.
I think ultimately it's a huge conversation, and I would love to find places to keep having it, but I don't think it's as simple as just having some people who are engaged and feel connected and supported by their community to come up with a list of like rules of what it means to be a good neighbor. You have to recognize that people who might be in the not a good neighbor box may never have had a sense of belonging to anything or anyone before, and may not have trust, may not have experienced what that even feels like. And so it's almost like rebellious against what they're not connected to. So like my initial thought when somebody first said, well, like, how could you do this? Like you could literally create your own community on your street. And in doing that, you're like intentionally reaching out to everybody in the same way. And, you know, through building of relationships and trust and rapport in those kinds of situations, it's like, hey, let's talk about what we want our neighborhood to be like. And I mean, I think the people that aren't naturally drawn to that for whatever the reasons are, would have to like see stuff in action before they would let their guard down enough, I think. I just think it's more complicated in that it has a lot to do with a sense of belonging.
Yep.
And people's life experiences from when they were kids and what that leaves them with in terms of capacity or skill to navigate.
And I think some of that has, you know, gone by the wayside over the years, Jill. I think you're right. It's like, you know, if you hear like my parents talk about when they were kids or whatever, you know, or when we were younger growing up, it's like everybody knew everybody else on that street. All the kids played together and that type of thing. And I think many times now people don't know their neighbor. They've never spoken to them. It's just something that we don't do anymore. Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I think if communities could be formed in as neighborhoods, I think we might be a little better off, because maybe that person living next door will now understand who lives next to them and why they do what they do, you know, or why they're expecting them to act in a certain way. So, and like Connie said before she left, I don't have an answer. I'm just throwing that out there, that maybe we need to work on building better relationships from neighbor to neighbor. You know, and I know one of the I will tell you what I can control, and that is encouraging neighborhood watch. And that's one of the things we would like to do. In years past, there was a large contingent of neighborhood watch groups here in Essex, and that kind of faded away over the years. And we'd like to bring that back. So if that helps keep people get together and know each other, then I think that's a great thing. I think that's where, neighborhood block parties, exactly. I mean, having something like that where everybody could come together on a night, you know, we want to do a national night out event here at the PD if COVID will allow us to. We would love to do that. So, you know, people can come together and get to know each other. But I think, like Lorraine just said, a block party that's a good spot. You know, have people come out, throw some hot dogs on the grill, and everybody have a good time for a night. You know, we'll put in a request with the village or the town to block a street off, and we'll go ahead and do that. You know, so I think those are some things that we can do better. You know, we can only control what we can control, I guess.
Yeah, it's incumbent upon each one of us to model the behavior that we would like to see in the community.
Right.
It starts with us. And you know, if you are abrasive and when you approach somebody that maybe you think is doing something wrong, well, what kind of response do you think you're going to get? You know, so it starts with each one of us.
Yeah.
Treating your neighbors the way you'd like to be treated.
Yep.
You know, that sort of.
Right. So there was a question in here from Gary Scott about the DLO position. And Gary is here still. I think he's actually the head of security for the school district. So I will answer that by saying I think it's going great. So is everyone here familiar, or do they know what the DLO position at the school is? Okay. So does everyone know what an SRO position is at a school? A school resource officer, right? So traditionally schools have had a school resource officer, where an officer was assigned to a school and We did that a couple of years ago as well, where we assigned an officer to just the high school, as other police departments have done. So this past summer, with everything that was going on and thinking outside the box and having new leadership here at the police department and also different things going on at the district, we partnered together and we decided that we would change our school resource officer to a district liaison officer. It's a title, right? Basically, instead of having an officer assigned to just the high school, we would take that officer and assign them to the whole school district, and they could work on things that are like safety related, individual issues that come up with kids. They could be there as a resource if they were asked to come in on that, instead of having them just assigned to one school. And part of that came from thoughts that, you know, that the officer could be seen as threatening by a section of the population at the school. So, you know, we put our officer now, he's in plain clothes, and he's dealing more with stuff on a more global level than just on an individual school. So I think it's working great. Our liaison officer is John Rutenberg. I'm not sure if any of you guys know him, but he's been doing this 20 years. He's a cowboy, he likes to think that he's a cowboy. He's got a cowboy mustache, and he's got a real cowboy attitude where he's very, very personable with people, and he's down to earth, and he's done a really good job with it. I see someone shaking or nodding their head there. He's just been good. He's been involved in so many things with the schools here in the last 6 months, from, you know, helping kids who are truant to, helping Gary deal with safety issues on a more district-wide level, where they're talking about, you know, how do we respond to an active shooter, those types of things. So that position is going very well. I think it's, in my mind, we're really glad to have it. We're glad that we have a relationship with the school system. I think they are a large sub-community of this community, and we need to be respective of what they need. So I think it's going good.
As a parent to a child in the middle school, he is doing amazing. His interaction with the kids is phenomenal. The kids love him.
Love to hear that.
And he's dealt with situations before that the school kind of felt like they couldn't deal with, especially around social media. It has been a huge benefit to parents to have him available.
Yeah. You know, that's something that we when we were in school didn't really have to deal with a lot. I mean, maybe you didn't, but I'm too old for that. When I was in school, we didn't have social media, you know, but we didn't have to deal with that aspect, because the bullying or whatever that can go on, it continues outside of school hours now. It goes on all times of the day or night. So yeah, that is one of the things that John has been involved with constantly, not just in your case, but in many cases, with the bullying that goes on social media, and kids, you know, have problems at home, and then they come to school with those things, and it shows in school. So, you know, having that relationship and having somebody there for the school as a resource, you know, to bring our tools and our perspective into that. And let's be honest, one of our tools that we bring is community outreach. They've done so much work in concert with our school resource officer and then district liaison officer. They come in with us a lot and help out with these problems. So yeah, I think it's a really good thing, Gary. Yep. Thanks, Mitch. See you later. Does anybody else have anything else they want to talk about, even not related? Anything going on in your neighborhoods, or anything going on in your life that you want to share with anybody?
Ron, I just wanted to circle back to the comments about post Roseanne's statements about whiteness. It seemed to have touched on something, because certainly from Roseanne being on the task force, that's why she's centered on that somewhat. But also to speak to the separation, all of us here, it looks like are all white. So the reason that there's focus on that is because the evidence shows that there's issues just from the data with how we approach non-whites. So that's why Roseanne talks about it. It's not to make us feel more separate. It's to acknowledge and to try to do better. So to me, it's not about separations because there is an issue, and until we acknowledge that, we can't work to do better. So
Sure.
I don't think it's about finger pointing per se. It's about trying to identify a problem.
Well, I think one of the largest things that we have learned in the last 8 months in law enforcement is that we have to take into account someone else's experiences when we're dealing with that person or talking to that person. You know, where they're coming from what was in their life, and we may not know what that is. They may have. I think somebody already said it here. There may be things going on in that person's life that they think what they're doing is the right thing. You know, so we've tried to learn to not be so quick to judge why a person is doing something. So I think it's a lesson of that as to everybody is just trying to understand more about what another person's experiences are when you come into something. And
right, and I'll give you a good example, Ron, because I can't remember if you were in my session for this one, but one of the I took in people when I was living in New Jersey. So one of my boarders, he was a friend of my son, he was Black, and he had too much to drink, and I was telling him he had to calm down or whatever, and he was out in my front stoop when I was talking to him, and it was late, and so it's going to bother neighbors. Anyway, when I talked to him about it, he was way too drunk, and and I was standing very close to him, but he raised his hands up, and my son was with me, and he raised his hands up in fists. And I felt threatened. I thought he was going to punch me. And my son put his arm, started putting his arm around him, and it turned into an altercation almost. And we were all three of us were very upset. And I asked him to, he told me he couldn't stay in the house for the night. So, and when he was ready and sober, to come back and talk to me about it. So when we talked about it, what was interesting was, from my perception and my experience and my background and upbringing, when someone raises their hands in that kind of proximity, it's a threat. And what he said to me was, from his experience, that's what he was taught to do, to show you that he said, if I really wanted to punch you, I would have punched you. He said, my hands were up to show you I wasn't going to touch you. To me, it was an aggressive move. To him, it was a non-aggressive move. So even just that kind of interaction, I learned, like, right, my experience from growing up in Vermont is that, well, not so much in New Jersey in that neighborhood. So it was just a very good lesson in terms of interaction and that kind of thing, that if you guys have that kind of thing on camera, would be great to kind of review, have the person involved in the interaction to get their perspective as well, so that, like Mitch said, we can learn social norms from each other, because clearly where one person grows up is a different social norm, or even what skin color you grow up in is a different social norm. And trying to dissect that and understand that, I think, would certainly help understand a lot and decrease some of the problems that we're having.
Yeah, good thoughts. Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything? Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
Okay. And to follow up on that a little bit, and what remarked earlier by Roseanne about labeling a crime as a hate crime until you find out differently. I think that is really dangerous. That, you got to get the facts before you come to a conclusion, and just to assume that something is a hate crime before you get the facts is just outrageous.
Yeah, we generally don't want to take in any investigation, we don't want to take a certain route, because we find that if you start taking a certain route with any kind of preconceived notion, that's the way you're going to go. So we try to be as objective as possible in any investigation. If it turns out a certain way, then that's how it turns out. But we let the evidence and the statements lead us to where that's going to lead us, and we don't go into things with preconceived notions. So.
Right, yeah. The facts need to speak for themselves.
And I don't know, I've definitely been hearing this as a topic of conversation at an international level, definitely in the United States, that there are BIPOC and American, Asian, Pacific Islander folks that are saying, that's what they're saying right now, that from their life experience and what they've been through, that they think that we should assume it is before we, I'm not saying I agree. I just want to say that that's part of the conversation that's happening now. And I think, especially because we're all white, it's at least worth hearing
I
why
understand that
and
thinking,
exploring that.
that thinking, Jill. I understand that.
Yeah.
I would disagree with that, however, saying, because I don't want to be led down a certain road. What I will say is we always have to keep every avenue open, and we shouldn't be just checking that box off and saying, oh, that's not what it is. Let's figure it all out first. And if that's a possibility, then let's keep that open at all times.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to propose a position on it. And I think you already spoke to it. You're looking at people a little bit differently now. Like if you're stopping somebody whose skin is a different color, your officers are recognizing now, like it's not like you're ignoring it and pretending that they're not. Like that's a difference that they bring. And I think more out of anything, just respect for people having space to say what their thoughts are. I think it's fine for us to listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Well, excellent conversation, everyone. Really very, very much appreciate everybody's time. And like I said, coming here and giving up an hour of your time to be with me. Very much appreciate it. So,
Ron, I remembered to record this time.
Okay, cool.
And somebody asked, I think it was Lorraine, was wondering if it was recorded and how would it be accessible? And I said that I thought it would be on the town website or the
Yeah, we're gonna put it on. Yeah, we'll put it on the police department's website. We're gonna create a spot for it there, and we'll get it put up there so people can access it if they want to. Yeah. How does everybody feel about that? Does anybody have any objections to that? Since y'all are here.
I think the community needs to hear the conversation.
Okay.
You know, and the issues that Mitch brought up about how we should be treating each other. You know, those are if the community hears that, all the better.
Okay, cool.
So the first time I forgot to hit record, the second time I recorded but didn't tell anybody. So the next time before we start, I'll say, and we're recording this, just so you know.
Hey, we're learning this, okay? We're making this up as we go. We're learning how to do this better and better every time. Soon we'll have a production value that'll be off the charts. So.
Jill, I received an email confirmation about the coffee with the chief about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that gets buried in my emails. And be helpful if the morning of, if you would send out an email blast with the link. I had to go search on the police website, and then finally through the Community Justice Center, I finally found the link. But
okay,
that would be helpful.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, we'll make sure to get that maybe like the day of or the night before or something, so everybody has it fresh.
Yeah, because I actually end up doing a lot of sending people emails and links and stuff. I realize that that's problematic.
Yeah, thank you.
We may just want to talk about possibly putting the link right on the flyer so that it's accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
I actually had to go and re-register to get the link.
Oh, you did.
I couldn't re-register.
And that's one of the things we've been talking about, is just what Jill just said, is like maybe we just put the link out there for, just put it out there, kind of like the meetings are, so everybody can access it. You don't have to register or anything. And that's one of the things we've been kind of experimenting with. So I think moving forward, maybe we can change that. So.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, everybody enjoy your fantastic weekend. It's not going to be great weather, but hopefully you've got some inside things to do. So.
Great. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks a lot, folks.
Thanks very much.
See you later. Bye-bye.
There will be another one sometime in April.
Yep.
Great.
Act as an insulator, right? So now that this is in, we want to create basically a catalyst that's going to send an electric charge from this battery into here, and it's